Good day. Welcome to another session of Folk Accountancy Tutorials. Remember to subscribe to the channel and then let us know what you think by commenting on this video. Today we are going to look at cost behavior, and straight away we'll put it that cost behavior has to do with how cost responds to changes in activity levels. And so as output increases or decreases, how does cost behave or respond towards that? That is what cost behavior is all about. And so we are going to look at how costs behave in categories. And then there are two main, let me say three ways that you can see cost behaving when output or activity levels are changing. And so we are going to look at the fixed cost, the variable cost, and the mixed cost. And so under cost behavior, we have fixed cost as a responsiveness, and then we have the variable cost, and then also we have the mixed cost. All right, so we are going to look at these type of costs as components of cost behavior, and then we are looking at how cost responds to changes in output or activity levels within the organization. And so looking at fixed costs are costs that remains unchanged. Look at the name, fixed. It remains unchanged regardless of changes in activity levels or output within the relevant range or a relevant range. And that is the key word that I will stress on as we move forward. The relevant range clause that I put there. Now, I know that a lot of us has learned over the years that fixed cost does not change. No matter what, it doesn't change. It remains fixed, the same constant. Now, I just want to challenge you at this level that fixed cost can change when it goes beyond a relevant range. And so fixed cost does not change, yes, but it is within a relevant range. When fixed costs exceed the relevant range, fixed costs can change. And so as we move forward, I'll come back and explain what I mean. So fixed cost is defined as costs that do not change or that remains unchanged regardless of the changes in output within a relevant range. All right, and then we can talk about variable cost. Variable cost, as the name suggests, they vary. So variable costs are costs that changes proportionately with the level of output. And here the key word that I will come back to explain is proportion. Now, it changes with proportion to the level of changes in changes in output or activity levels. And so as activity levels or output are changing, variable cost will change, but it will change in the same proportion as output is changing. And then we have the mixed cost. So the mixed cost is what some others call the semi-fixed cost, the semi-variable cost, and what have you. Now the mixed cost is a cost that has a fixed component and a variable component. And so mixed costs are a cost that have both fixed elements and variable elements. And therefore, there will be some variations in mixed cost as output increases. One key example of a mixed cost is total cost of production. Obviously, any total cost of production will have a fixed component and a variable component. And so when we say total cost is usually a very good example of a mixed cost. Now, let me take my time and let you understand these things very well with an illustration. And so let us assume that we have this simple figures for analysis. So this is fixed cost. So let us assume that we have an organization. Now, let's assume that there was a zero output. Let me put the dollar sign here as the currency. Let's assume that the organization is not producing. Now, we are saying that fixed cost remains unchanged within a relevant range. Now, one characteristic of a fixed cost is that whether you are producing or not, once the organization is in existence, those costs will be incurred. One example is rent. For example, if you rent your premises as an organization or a company, your premises is a rented apartment. Whether you decide to produce your goods or you are not producing, whether you are working or not, you will still pay your rent because you are occupying the building. And so rent is a very good example of a fixed cost. And so those costs, whether you are producing or not, you incur. Let us assume that the fixed cost of this organization that I'm using is $20. And so even though there was no output for the year, $20 will still be incurred as fixed cost. Now, variable cost varies proportionately with output. In other words, as you produce, for every unit that you produce, you incur a proportionate variable cost. And so once you are not producing anything, there will be nothing for variable cost. So there will be a zero variable cost. Now, total cost is the combination of fixed cost and variable cost. And so once there is a fixed cost incurred, there will be a total cost of $20, which is the variable cost that was incurred. And so this is example of what I was talking about. Now let us assume that they are now producing one. When they decide to produce just one unit of the product, now fixed cost remains 20 cedis, because let's assume that we are still in the relevant range. Fixed cost remains 20 cedis, and let's also assume that the variable cost per unit for this organization is $15. And so if they produce every one unit, they incur a variable cost per unit of $15. And so we multiply $15 by the output of one unit, and then we have $15 as the total variable cost. And so now when there is an output of one unit, total cost will now be $35, meaning that that is the addition of the fixed cost and the variable cost component. Again, let us assume that they are now producing two units. Now with the 2 units, fixed cost remains the same once it's within the relevant range. Now I told you that variable cost per unit is $15, and so we multiply the $15 by 2, and then we have variable cost of 30 because it's increasing in proportion. And so our total cost now becomes $50. Then at 3, 20 for fixed cost, 45 for variable cost, and then 65 for total cost. At 4 units, still within the range, fixed cost does not change. And so variable cost grows to 60. That is 15 by 4, and our total cost grows to $80. And finally, let's assume that we have 5 units produced within a relevant range. And so we have fixed cost still of 20, variable cost of 75, and then a total cost of $95. Okay, so using this table as an example, you see that this is how cost behavior is or looks like. Now, I'm just trying to explain what I meant by relevant range and what I meant by proportion. Now, when we come to the fixed cost, we realize that even when we were not producing, we incurred $20. Now, when we are producing 5 units, we incur $20. Now, it means that this is a type of cost that will be incurred regardless of changes in your output or activity level. That is what we mean by fixed cost. Now, take note also that let's assume that this $20 is cost for rent, and so the rent of their premises that they are using to produce is $20, and so whether they are producing or not, they are paying rent. Let's assume that the room that they have rented, the capacity of the room is such that it can only produce and store 5 units, and any extra units that they will want to produce, they will have to rent a new room or new apartment. And so if this organization decides to produce 6 units of the product, listen very carefully. If this organization decides to produce 6 units of the product, they may need an extra room because their first room will not be able to produce more than 5, and that may cause them to rent an extra room. And if the extra room will also cost them $20, now anything they are producing beyond 5, they will need 2 rooms, and so their rent is going to be doubled with another $20, and that will increase fixed cost to 40. So it means that we have left the range of 1 to 5, and now we are in a new range. And so they will now produce 40. Variable cost per unit will be the same. And so at this point, we will still multiply 6 by 15 and have a variable cost per unit of 90. And which will give us a total cost of 130. When we are producing 7, fixed cost will still be 40 because we are still in the range. Because I said that a room can produce just 5 units. That is what I said. And so it will go on until we reach 10. Now after 10, and when we want to produce 11, we may need an extra room. And we may have to rent a new room. That will increase our fixed cost to 60. So what I'm trying to tell you is that fixed cost can change. So let us run away with the old mentality that fixed cost does not change. So you will see that 1 to 5 is a range. 6 to 10 will be another range. Then maybe 11 to 15 will be the third range. So we are saying that we are coming back to the definition of fixed cost, and I'm saying that fixed cost is a cost that remains unchanged regardless of changes in output within the relevant range. Because once we exceed the relevant range, fixed cost can change or step up, and that is what we call step fixed cost. And I'm going to give you a diagram for how fixed cost will step up. And so I believe you are understanding the fixed cost very well now. Now we move to the variable cost to analyze that as well. Now look at the variable cost. I said the variable cost changes as output also increases. It increases when output is increasing, and it decreases when output is decreasing. Now, it is not enough to say variable cost changes with output, because you can see that total cost is also changing with output. But total cost is a mixed cost because it involves those variable and fixed costs. So we will see that as output was 1, variable cost was 15, mixed cost was 35. When output increased to 2, variable cost increased to 30, total cost also increased. When it moved to 3, variable cost increased to $45, total cost. So you will see that both the variable cost and the total cost are increasing with output. So if you say the variable cost is a cost that increases when output is increasing, you have said nothing, because total cost or mixed cost also increases when output is increasing. What makes the difference is the proportion. Now let us try and do something here. Now if you want to divide 15 by 1, you are going to get 15. That is the variable cost per the output. If you divide $30 by 2, you will have 15 as well. Now if you divide $45, which is the total variable cost, by the output, you still have $15. If you divide 60 by 4, you have $15 per unit. And if you divide 75 by 5, you have 15. What am I trying to tell you? I'm trying to tell you that even though variable cost is increasing, it is increasing at the same ratio, with the same proportion with output. So no matter what, you are going to get the same variable cost per unit. That is what I mean by proportion. But if you take total cost, which is a mixed cost, let us try that as well. If you divide $20 by 0, of course you have a math error. It's undefined. If you divide if you divide 35 by 1, you have $35. If you divide 50 by 2, you have 25. You see that there is changing. It's not constant like that of the variable cost per unit. If you divide 65 by 3, you have 21.66 whatever. If you divide 80 by 4, you have 20. And if you divide 95 by 5, you have 19. What you observe is that if you divide a mixed cost by output, it changes. The figure will reduce per unit. But if you divide variable cost per output, is constant. And so we say that variable cost per unit is fixed, but then mixed cost or total cost per unit reduces as it's increasing. So what we are trying to say now is that variable cost is in proportion to output. Mixed cost is not in proportion. And so if you want to define variable cost for full mark in an exam, you don't just say that variable cost is a cost that changes as output changes. No, you say that variable cost changes in proportion to the changes on output or activity levels, or they change or it increases proportionately to increase in output. That is how you look at variable cost, because total cost also changes, but it doesn't change in the same proportion. That is what we mean by variable cost. And so mixed cost, I believe, is well understood. And so the next thing that we are going to do now is that we are going to look at the graphical presentation of these costs. We are going to look at how the fixed cost will look like on a graph, how the variable cost will look like, and how the mixed cost will also look like on a graph. we are going to look at how to present each of these costs graphically. And so this is the point on the Cartesian plane. This is the y-axis where I represent it by cost in dollars and then output in units on the x-axis. And so this is the origin of 0. And so I'm going to do a plotting just to understand the trends. So let us try plotting fixed cost. So this is the fixed cost and output is for the x-axis. So each of these will represent the y when we want to plot. And so fixed cost, when output is 0, fixed cost is 20. So we plot that here. Now when output was 1 unit, fixed cost still maintained at 20. When output was 2, fixed cost is 20 still. When it's at unit 3 units, it's still 20. 4, 20. 5, $20. And so what we say is that we can draw a line through like that. And so this is the fixed cost line. So you see that the fixed cost will always show this pattern on the graph. This is how the fixed cost will always look like, because no matter the output within the range is going up. Now I will come up to a step up in fixed cost. Now let us assume that at point 6 we are still going by this. Fixed cost stepped up to 40. And so at point 6 we are not going to plot it here, but we are rather going to plot it on the line of the $40. And so it will come this way and then step up like that and then continue to move on that line. And so you see that when fixed costs are changing, there will be a step up in this form as we get to the ranges. And this is what we call stepped fixed cost. There is a step up, so we call it stepped fixed cost. That means our fixed cost changed as we exceeded the range of activity level. Okay, then we move. Sorry. Okay, so coming back to the normal, ignoring the step up, this is our fixed cost line. Now, if you want to plot the variable cost line, let us assume something. Now, with the variable cost line, you see that when output was 0, variable cost was 0. And so the point will be plotted in the origin. And then when the output was 1 unit, variable cost per unit was $15. And that will be somewhere here. Okay, and so when the fixed cost, when output was 2, variable cost per unit moved up to 30. So 30 can be traced from here to 2. So this is where it will be. And then when output was 3, variable cost was 45. So that will also be traced up here. And when output was 4 units, variable cost grew up to $60. And so we can trace that as well and then plot it here. And then finally, when output was 5, variable cost was up to 75, somewhere here. And so what we do is that we are going to draw a line through these points. Forgive me for my crooked line, but this is how it's going to look like. And so this will be your variable cost line. And this is going to be your fixed cost line. And so the variable cost line will go this way in a diagonal form. From the origin, it will go in a positive direction from the origin to the right in a diagonal way. And that is how the variable cost will look like. And so you usually see the variable cost diagram like this from the origin. This is the variable cost. That is because when output is 0, variable cost per unit is 0. Okay, so that is it for variable cost. And then finally we can look at the mixed cost line. Now the mixed cost line will begin from the fixed cost, because even when there was no output, total cost was 20. And so in order to plot this line, we'll start this way. 0 to 20 will be plotted here, 1 to 35 here, and then 3 to 65, 3 against 65 somewhere here, and then 4 against 80 here, okay, and then 5 against 95 here. And so the total cost line will begin from the origin through these points. Oh, sorry, forgive me for my crooked lines because I'm not using a graph. Through these points like that up, and this will be total cost, and that is the mixed cost line. And so the mixed cost line on a graph, a typical graph, will look like this. Will not begin from the origin like that of the variable cost. It will begin from somewhere here up like that, mixed cost or total cost, because it doesn't begin from 0. In other words, even when we are not producing, we are incurring something. That is the meaning of the total cost. And this is how we represent this cost behavior graphically. Okay, so this is the graphical representation of the cost behavior, and we are going to use this for our next topic, which is the cost volume profit or the break-even analysis, where we are going to add revenue and look at our break-even points and all that. So for now, it's just the cost that I did analysis for. Okay, so we are going to summarize what we've studied today by trying to familiarize ourselves with the diagrams of the various behavior, cost behavior patterns. So when we see a fixed cost, this is the diagram for fixed cost. And then when we see variable cost, this is the diagram for variable cost. And then when we see mixed cost or total cost, will not begin from the origin, but it will go also in that direction. And so this is how we'll look at it. And then finally, let us look at our stepped fixed cost as well. And let's try and be familiar with the diagram. When you see a diagram in this form, then you know that that is a stepped cost. Or it could also be in this form, beginning from the top and declining in step. So this is another example of a step cost. And so fixed cost, this is when fixed cost is changing when it's exceeding the range of activity level. That is what we have to do for today. Remember to subscribe to the channel. It's very, very important. Share this video and let others also have a benefit. Ring the notification bell as well, because more videos will be uploaded very soon. And then remember that our next topic is the break-even analysis or the cost volume profit analysis as we continue our study of cost behavior. Until then, see you next time. Bye bye.